Happy Labor Day weekend, everybody. I hope you guys are all going to have a great Labor Day. Starting it off by working in my local dive bar, getting work done on this piece for John's Longbox. Remember, he has a campaign open for this book, and remember this artwork is not going to be in the current book, but things go well for John, and he's able to continue to produce books. I will be this story. The Devil's Printer will be in one of those future books. So, and as you can see, I'm working on the hearth right now, and I've already established the shadow going up. So right now, I'm just working up here, and I'm being very meticulous. I'm using the fine nib, and this is a fine nib, but it's an old fine nib, so it's getting into the point where it does a medium dot, no longer a real fine dot, which is okay. As I said in my last video, it's kind of what I want now from it. This fine nibs on the verge of becoming a medium or a fat dot nib. So and that's what happens. You work with your tools, and just because it's no longer giving you a fine dot, doesn't mean that you just cast it aside. You use it and you adjust and you break out a new nib to use for your fine dots. And this one will eventually become, so these dots here, eventually this nib will be producing those type of dots. So you just use it, and you just use it until it breaks. So, but we are in week 34. Actually, this tomorrow I'll be doing week 35, which will be this current week. So this is last week's. Sign Comics posted on Twitter, X, however you want to, whichever you prefer. And we start off with days 229 and 230, and it is Robin, issues 4 and 5, signed by Tom Grummett and Ray Kreising. Now, Scott Hanna did the inks for Robin issue number 1. And then, after issue number 1, Ray Kreising, he took over, and he was then doing the inks over Tom Grummett. And I really like Tom Grummett's work. I'm a big fan of his work. You can see where he gets a lot of influence from Jack Kirby, but how he does, I would say he's a refined Jack Kirby in how he does it. But he does a very dynamic style, just like Jack does. And these two issues, Robin was with Spoiler. Spoiler was a character created in Detective Comics. Tom Lyle created her. She was the daughter of the Clue Master, and she was becoming a superhero vigilante, basically to foil her father, because he was a supervillain. She had a lot of repressed anger towards her daddy because of abandoning her and being a supervillain. So she for in the beginning, in Detective Comics and in this story in Robin, Robin's going up against the Clue Master. So, of course, the Spoiler shows up. And then, as time went on, Stephanie, Spoiler, she started showing up more and more. She became almost like a recurring character in the series. She became like a side character for Robin. And what I really like, first of all, I've always enjoyed Spoiler from the first time she showed up in Detective Comics, which was done by, created by, and the story was by Tom Lyle and Scott Hanna. So they are the ones that are credited with creating her. But she really started showing up in a bunch of different Robin stories. And the biggest thing about it is how you were really able to watch her grow as a character. So, you know how like when they first introduced Tim Hunter, how he was smart enough to figure out who Batman was and realizing that Batman needs a Robin. So they already established right at the bat, it's like, what more can this kid learn? And part of the story was, with doing this series with Robin, was he was breaking away from Batman because Batman had his back broken from Bane, and the successor didn't want anything to do with Robin, so he had to break out on his own. So he got his own series. And of course, again, I love Tom Grumman's stuff, so of course I was buying this title specifically because of Tom Grummett. Um, and I liked the title enough, liked the characters enough, that even when Tom Grummett passed on to a new series and wasn't doing Robin anymore, I still would pick up the book on a semi-regular basis. So, in fact, I have some issues signed by Aaron Lopresti when he did 2 or 3 issues of Robin. So, but no, I liked how over the course of time, because we have Robin as the main hero, yes, he has obstacles he's got to overcome, but he gets kind of stale. And so by having Spoiler on, I gotta clean this nib. So having Spoiler on as a side character, we were able to watch her grow as a character. And that leads into day 231, Robin 126, where Spoiler, Stephanie, becomes the Girl Wonder. She takes place of Tim Hunter. And I remember it was like in the comic books, they were doing more, Chuck Dixon was doing more with Robin. So he wasn't necessarily involved. He didn't have to worry about like the continuity of whatever was going on in the Bat titles had to be included in the Robin title. And he was doing more with Tim Drake at the private school that he was going to school at. And so Batman has Spoiler take the helm of the Girl Wonder as and I like that because it's one of those where it's like over the course of over 100 issues or 100 plus issues, we got to see Spoiler get to the point where she was deemed worthy to be the sidekick of Batman. And I think of it this way, okay? I played soccer my freshman year in high school. Okay, I was JV, third string, so yeah, I wasn't that good. Okay, but here's the point: is if in the high school I went to, okay, most everybody, if you were a freshman or a sophomore, most likely you were on the JV team. If you weren't that good, but you're still going out every year, you're still in the JV team as a junior. But then as a senior, you automatically, because you're a senior, you made the senior, you made the varsity team. So this team was primarily the varsity soccer team was primarily made up of JV and seniors. Okay, and I remember this when you would travel with the varsity team, and the JV team would play first, then the varsity team would play, and then we as JV players, we would sit in the stands, and a lot of times we were like stupid little knuckleheads. We just talk and whatnot and bullshit, and we didn't pay too much attention. Some of us would. Sometimes we would pay attention to the game. But the coach of the varsity team, there's this one kid by the name of Chris. He was a sophomore, okay, and he was good. He wasn't good enough for the. He was like just below good enough to make the varsity team. Well, we were playing Boiling Springs, and Chris, the varsity coach, had Chris sit on the bench with the varsity team, and he told him, "There's this one player. Study him, watch him the entire game. So he sat there and he watched him. He watched him. It got to the point where he knew every single move that that one player was going to make. And this was like one of the top performers or top players of the other team for Boiling Springs. So the score was very close. And then for 3 quarters, Chris is watching this one player. For the final quarter of the game, the coach puts Chris in. Chris stuck to that player like glue. That player, who was a very effective player for Boiling Springs, he could not move anywhere. He could not go and do anything without Chris being right on his fucking ass. And he basically and we watched, and like of course we're all JV and we're like, oh wow, he made it. He's on the field. He's playing with the JV squad. And then I'm watching, and it's one of those where it's like someone else who was really paying attention. And they was like, yeah, all he's been doing all game is watching this player. And I watched as Chris stuck to him like glue and basically took that player out of the game. And we ended up winning that game. Why? Because Chris was already proven himself as a JV player, but he was given the opportunity to just, like I said, just stick to that guy. But he proved himself enough from being a JV player that he graduated, that he was now a varsity player. And that was really cool to watch. And that's how I see Stephanie. Whereas like Stephanie, we watched her over like showing up every once in a while over 100 issues. It reached the point where she proved herself to the point where Batman goes, "You're worthy of being the girl, of being a boy wonder or slash girl wonder." And it was for like 3 issues, and I think it was that Bill Willingham did, and I think it was intentional that uh, Batman had misjudged, and it wasn't that she wasn't ready. She was like mortally wounded or severely wounded that I think it was one of those where it's like she had to like fake her own death so she could heal up. But it was that, and after that story, Tim came back to being Robin for Batman. But the point was is that we watched her as she made her mistakes with Robin to the point where she was then worthy of becoming, of Batman seeing her worth, and Batman was like, "You are worthy of being a girl wonder, of being part of the Bat cast of characters." And I think about how like when DC did their rebirth and Batman created a Bat team, it was Spoiler was one of those characters. It was Tim Robin, uh, Spoiler, Batwoman, Clayface, and they had Batgirl, but they renamed her as Oracle because they were using Batgirl. Because remember, it was after the new 52. Barbara Gordon was back as Batgirl, and she wasn't paralyzed anymore. Dumbass mistake. And again, when they did that story arc with Peter Tomasi, what's the first thing Peter does? Well, I can't have a bell tower because Barbara's no longer paralyzed. I'll create a facsimile. I think it was like I don't know. He gave it some type of like it was a news story. It's basically he created a bell tower, calling it something else for the Bat characters to operate out of, and she was one of those characters. And she after that, she always, and the other thing also is that Peter Tomasi, he saw the potential also in Stephanie because, as he put it, he really wanted Stephanie. He really wanted to do some work with her because he saw that, like, hey, this is the daughter of uh, the Clue Master, and so she's at an extra level of analysis where she looks at things differently from the average police detective. She thinks past how a police detective would act, and that's going to get him. I liked how like, you see that progression of the character, but it wasn't like the biggest problem we see with characters in comics, where it's like you'll have a character, let's say the Blue Bomber, okay, and instead of having slow progression of that character over a long period of time, they do all these changes within 10 issues, and it's like, what else are you going to do with that character? And that's the reason why I liked how they used to do DC Comics, where the evolution progression of these characters was very slow. And then when they finally would have the progression of the character, you could see it crept up on you. So by the time the character was meeting their full potential, you're looking and go, yeah, that makes sense. It wasn't one of those where it wasn't like done as a quick fix, which is one of the biggest things one of my biggest criticisms always been now is they rush the character through all this progression, and it's one of those where it's like, this is stupid. You don't get that natural feel of the character evolution. Again, I think about how Stargate went 10 seasons, and you saw that slow progression with Daniel Jackson and Samantha Carter and Teal'c. The progression made sense over the course of 10 seasons. Whereas you see how like they now with like the way they're doing like Strange New Worlds or Discovery with Star Trek, and they do the character progression so quick it doesn't make sense. It's like, wait a second, you just had them doing this, now you're there. It didn't make sense for them to be very quickly catching on, and almost like they can do no wrong within. But when issue one, in episode one, they're doing this, but by issue five, they're doing this. There was no progression of character development, which I think is one of the biggest things. It has nothing to do with gender identity and uh, whether they're a lesbian or a straight or trans or black or Chinese or purple skinned. It has to do with character progression. You got to do it so it's natural. It's not one of those where it's like you have. I guess the easiest way to explain this is that it's like you have the character learning kindergarten skills in episode one, but by episode five, they're doing college level mathematics, and that doesn't work. That doesn't work. The audience needs to grow with the character. And that's what we got with spoilers. We got that growth, and that's the reason why I think she deserves. Where if you were to do let's say you did an Elseworlds in the future, okay? Let's say you did a DC 2099, okay? And you did it where Batman and Robin and Nightwing are no longer around. Spoiler's the one who's around, and you had her as Batman. It would make sense because they're showing the progression of the character from Detective Comics through Robin through Detective Comics again. So if you were to do that, the audience will look at it whether they like spoiler or not. They would have to look and go, yeah, with the progression of that character, it makes sense that she would be this lone Bat character in DC 2099. You get what I'm saying? So that's how I'm seeing. Again. That's the reason why I picked these issues to get signed and to show to you guys. So, and then from there we go to day 232, 233, and 234 with Ravage 2099, and signed by Keith Williams. He did. I have issues 1, 5, and 6. And again, this was one of those deals where it's like this, because remember, even though this was the progression of the character, it's like by issue 5, he's got these like superhero mobilities, but they were already establishing how he was kind of holding his own as just a regular guy, fighting the evil corporate assholes. And here's a perfect example. Okay, I have it was day 234, Ravage number 6, and he is flying away from the bad guys being pursued, and he's in the Fantastic Car. And here, what it was is he found the Fantastic Car in a junkyard, and he didn't know it was a Fantastic Car. He's like, "Hey, look at this flying bathtub. Hey, oh, these controls aren't too hard to work out or to figure out how to use because it's so far in the future." That whereas like in the 1960s, the average person wouldn't know how to operate the Fantastic Car, but for someone in 2099, operating the Fantastic Car is really easy. And I looked at that and I was like, issue 6 should have been in issue 2 or issue 3. It would have made a lot more sense. And I actually would have preferred if Ravage was the type of character where he was finding this old discarded junk, and let's say it was like uh, Iron Man's energy gauntlets or Captain America's shield, and it was like cracked in half or split in thirds, that type of thing. And those I would, and he had like, let's say, Spider-Man's web shooters. He found the web shooters, and he was able to quickly figure out how to make the the fluids needed. I think that would have been a whole lot better progression wise for him, instead of uh, first of all waiting so long for him to develop superhuman abilities. I actually preferred it when he was like, when he was not didn't have fantastic abilities, and he was just fighting. He was just fighting first the corporate greed of the company he was working for, and then I don't know, they had like a Morlock type character, Overlord. That was like a poor man's Doctor Doom, if you will. I thought him without abilities and just the found objects, or maybe he had developed, maybe he came across Wolverine's skeleton, and so he had the adamantium armor by the bones, like he had the rib cages across, like as an exo armor. You know what I mean? That would have I thought that would have been much cooler. So, but yeah, I've got issues 1 and 5, both signed by